MarinaTex is a company developing materials and coatings from seafood waste and seaweed, designing products that are alternatives to single-use plastics that ultimately feed the planet, not pollute it. Unlike a lot of the current alternatives on the market, which are all using fossil-based materials, MarinaTex, on the other hand, is taking that and flipping on its head and going, well, if we need to design for materials and create products that have a shorter lifespan, why don't we create materials that actually can decompose in that environment? So we're focusing on a few specific applications, particularly with coatings and films. The industry so far has gone from plastic products. They've tried to reduce their amounts of plastic used. So what they've been doing is laminating cardboard or card or paperboard with plastic. But ultimately that renders that material unrecyclable. As for example, sandwich boards in sandwich boxes. So that's where we're looking to provide alternatives to give that actually truly plastic-free product. But there's a lot of greenwashing going on. So MarinaTex started as my undergrad project. I graduated back in 2019. The project then won the James Dyson Award, which gave me the funding and kind of clout to continue the business. Back in my uni degree, I gave myself a really broad brief. My brief was to add value to waste. Whenever you're working with a waste stream, it's really important to work with a mono waste, which basically means a waste that's the same. So you're not having to separate any materials, because that's an extra step. I went to one of my lecturers and asked if they had any contacts with anyone in industry, and I was introduced to a fish processing plant down the road in New Haven. They're now based in Brighton. I went there and I could have done something with their waste cardboard, their waste plastic or polystyrene, and ultimately I was led over to the big bucket of fish heads, skins, scales, guts, bloods. I felt the skins and the scales in my hands and I was like, they're so strong, they're so flexible. Found out that they were just either getting dumped or getting ground down into fish meal. In other countries, it's so low value that it's just dumped into rivers. I want to use those strength properties and use those flexibility properties for materials that have such a similar likeness. The challenge with plastic is that it's had over 70 years to optimise. It's not just the material that's been optimised, it's the processes that's been optimised, it's the supply chains that have been optimised. So what that produces is really low cost products. Even though we can drop into some of those existing infrastructure, it's still going to cost more to begin with. So what we've got to think about is how can we make the other aspects of the material also cost less. So for example, in our situation, we're using a waste stream as raw material. We're using a lot of temperatures that are all under 100 degrees as well. So keeping production costs low through low energy costs. Part of circularity and part of our core beliefs as a company is that we want to do it right. So we don't want to cut corners when it comes to our supply chain. We want to make sure that it's being fished sustainably. Actually, if we want to do things right, we're going to have to maybe spend a bit more money to create those solutions, and then ultimately we can then optimise it, just like plastic has optimised over those 70 years. Because we've done some research into the true effects of plastic, and it's not just the cost of the product, it's also the cost to the environment, it's the cost to human health, it's the cost to essentially the future of us as on this planet. And it's something that we're all paying for it. We're all having to do the clear up through our taxes. We're all having to pay for the NHS. So we're seeing these costs. We're ultimately paying for it, but we're just not paying for it on the label or in the shop. I think the government can do multiple different things to help businesses like my own. One is funding, and additionally bringing in some of those regulations that will help support the more novel materials. We've already seen them bringing in the plastic ban, which has definitely added rocket fuel to corporates being able to want to find alternatives. So the next steps for MarinaTex is to raise additional investment. So investors come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are really knowledgeable about circularity. Some of them have only just heard about sustainability. So there's a real spectrum. Because of that, we obviously want our investors to see our value. I think investors, what they love to see is a sustainable supply chain. So supply chain resilience is something that's really important, and that's something that circularity does really well. We've just piloted our materials. We've come out of the labs for the first time and put it into an industrial setting. We will hopefully in the next 2 years be producing it at mass scale, and they'll be on the shelves.